Hello.
Hi, Aurel. Hi, Kari.
Hello, good
Hi,
morning.
everyone.
Good morning.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see that. Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Perfect. Sorry for being a bit late. I was struggling with
No problem.
my technical setup, as always. Always this. But now I think I have it together with paper.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you.
Good morning.
Hi,
Good
hi.
morning.
Hi. Or good evening. I say good morning.
Yeah, good morning. And good very evening, Selva. Is it? What time is it?
It's 8:30 p.m. bedtime
Oh.
sooner.
Bedtime.
Well, that's okay. I think it's actually not a bad time, I think, like late afternoon in Europe, because everyone can kind of attend in a reasonable time. Except the Australians in wintertime. For them, I think it's a bit late. Because we have someone who works with us who lives in Melbourne, and when there's like daylight saving, it's horrible for her. All the team meetings. She used to moderate some of the FairTalks, and then she always had to kind of do it, I think, at 2 a.m. or something. She stopped, so not really pleasant. All right, we have 160 people who signed up on Zoom. In our experience, we lose about 20 to 30% between the sign up and the event. But I think we can expect probably around 90 to 100 people, maybe more. Yeah, so gonna be good. I'll wait until kind of 1 to 2 more minutes to let everyone in a bit before. And then I have a couple of notes and kind of housekeeping notes I'll start with before introducing you, or rather kind of saying who is on the panel, and let you introduce yourself, everyone. Yes, discuss kind of about a minute, so just a sentence or two per person, and then we'll come to the introduction session that we discussed in the meeting. Probably about 15 minutes then for this 10 to 15 minutes, kind of these first questions, about 3 minutes each. And then we have, about 15, 20 minutes or something for kind of the discussion before, probably 15 minutes before we go to the open questions of the audience. Kind of then go into questions where I expect we'll have quite a lot of questions. All right, you ready to let everyone in? Okay, and start letting people in. Hello, everyone. We'll wait another couple of minutes for more people to join before we start. All right. I believe most people have joined. Welcome everyone to this FairTalk. I hope you can all hear me well. As you know, we are having this FairTalk on a topic of informed consent. Just a few words about the host of this FairTalk. As you probably most know, Fairpicture. For everyone else, Fairpicture is a platform for ethical photo and video production. We support nonprofits and impact brands in local content production, content collection, and ethical communication strategy. If you're interested to get regular updates, feel free to visit our website, subscribe to the newsletter, or join us on our LinkedIn page. Before we start, a couple of housekeeping notes. Please keep yourself muted throughout the meeting, as we are quite a few participants. Also, if you have questions, especially later on for the second half of the meeting, please ask those questions in the chat. This helps me pick up all the questions that come and address them to the participant or the panelists that are best suited to answer these questions. And since we are recording this call, we will do a recording, send it to you later on, and also put it on YouTube. If you'd like, or if you don't want to be on this recording, just mute yourself and switch off your camera, and then it will only be the panelists being in the video. Quick note to the agenda, as with all the FairTalks, will follow a similar structure. After a short introduction, we'll have a panel discussion with the 4 participants of this panel, and then an open discussion in the second half of this hour with questions from the audience and open discussion and exchange. Bear in mind that FairTalk as a format is really intended to have an open discussion with everyone, share, exchange. So also feel free to share thoughts in the chat, comments, experiences. This really helps us kind of navigate these topics that we are all learning together. Now to the topic of informed consent. As you know, this is a really hot topic right now in the industry. That we see many organizations reviewing their process at the moment to make it more ethical. They are often, or this is a bit our experience, often faced with the challenge of balancing the informed and the ethical experience elements of consent with practical challenges. So kind of keeping the informed consent process fair to the people that we collect consent from, but at the same time have an efficient process in place that is suitable, especially for smaller organizations, but also creators or even larger content teams. This is really what this panel is about. What we try to kind of have this discussion about is, well, what are practices, what are experiences, what are processes we can follow to kind of combine this. So we have an ethical, fair consent collection process that we can also apply practice and does not only exist on paper. And for this panel, I'm really happy to have 4 great panelists in today. On the one side, on the more, say, practical side, we have Josemarie and Selva, creators from the Fairpicture network, and on, let's say, the more client side, but also say more theoretical side, we have Kari and Shazia who will join us in our panel. But I'm happy to kind of give the word directly to the panelists to shortly introduce themselves. Yeah, maybe give a short introduction, why you feel it's important to talk about informed consent, and what your experiences are, or what your relationship is to the topic. I'll give the word maybe first to Selva, and then Josemarie, and then Kari and Shazia to introduce yourself. You're muted, all of you. Sorry, I had to mute you before, so please switch on your camera, your microphone.
Thanks, Aurel. I'm Selvaprakash Lakshmanan, visual creator based in Bangalore, India. Thank you so much for Fairpicture to organize this talk. And I'm happy to share my experience. I would love to learn from the fellow panelists and the audience. I'm like, this informed concern is very important. But looking from 2 perspectives. One is from the organizational point of view. Other one is as an individual visual creator. As an individual visual creator, when working on personal project, we often do photograph people. At the early stage of these projects, we might not fully aware that how these images will be used, whether they will end up on a hard drive or be featured on a website, appear in a magazine, or showcased in an exhibition or a photo festival, etc. So we are not aware of it, but we photograph these people, and one fine day we might publish in a magazine and things like that, but we are not sure that people are comfortable with those things. So it is crucial to inform those people we photograph about how their images might be used. By doing so, we can give them an opportunity to express their comfort level and willingness to be part of these usages. So thanks to Fairpicture app too, because I start using these concern form apps these days, and so that you can tell these people what is the usabilities and things like that, and if they are comfortable in publishing in the magazine and things like that, so you can get your signature on the consent form, informing them how it's going to be used and things like that. So that is very important, and which is very ethical too. So that's what that is what I'm personally thinking, that it's very crucial in these days. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, Josemarie, do you want to go next? Quick introduction about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Josemarie, visual creator based in Kenya with Fairpicture. And I think informed consent is, looking back on like photography and filmmaking or anything that deals with taking people's pictures, has come from a place of just taking it, and especially when it's something for an organization or something that has some sort of, where you're not taking pictures, let's say with your family. I think it leaves a lot of room for the people being taken pictures of, where's my picture going? And did I actually know why I said yes? And I think especially in the context of like even where I'm from in Kenya, where, you know, there's been lots of projects that come in and take pictures in the past. I think it's created this idea for people when somebody comes to take a picture, it's like, now I know that some people take my picture and then they go and sell it. So I think not just having consent and saying yes, somebody saying yes, being able to make sure that the person understands why you're asking to take their picture and how you're using, like Selva said, is really important. And my practical experiences also come from a place of learning. Coming from just knowing how to take pictures and loving taking pictures and taking pictures of people, even if it's like people I know, to then understanding the importance of, as long as I'm going to take pictures of someone, it's really, really important for me to take the time to make sure that they're comfortable with me taking the picture. So yeah.
Thank you, Kari.
I'm Kari. I'm the content manager for Vitamin Angels, an international public health nonprofit based in the United States. My job entails collecting the photos and videos and interviews in the service locations that we go to. We work with a lot of really sensitive populations, so it's really important that we get informed consent from our participants. We have a lot of high visibility donors that also are allowed to use our content. So it's extra important that everyone's super aware of how their image could be used. As a result, I initiated the creation of the Equitable Content Collection Standards, which is a beefy document of about 30 pages that gets really specific on how our staff interacts with our participants on location. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Shazia?
Yes, thanks, Aurel, for this opportunity. Hello, everyone. Let me briefly introduce myself. Shazia is my name. I'm at the moment a senior advisor at SAFO, which is the Swiss Competence Center for International Development Cooperation, based in Vienne, Switzerland. I would say it's important for me to be here because from a career of about 20 years now, which is where I navigated humanitarian settings to development, human rights, child protection sort of environments. I always felt it very strongly, even from a personal perspective, to keep sort of sight of a human rights-based approach. And I think ultimately now in my current role, as we accompany individuals and organizations navigating their work more generally, as a sector, I've seen how we've evolved, how we've improved, and perhaps also how we've learned from our mistakes. And I think, as you all very well know, how and what and with whom we communicate matters. And I really believe that despite the complexity, we need to hold quite carefully that responsibility that we all have remaining accountable to affected people, but also to ourselves when it comes to the images, stories, and the information we produce and how we use it in our work. So it's lovely to be here as well. My father is a photographer, so I feel in very good company with some of my hosts and panelists, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to start directly with you with something you already started with, Shazia, like kind of in your experience working for several international humanitarian development organizations all over the world, like where would you say right now the sector is when it comes to kind of on a broader perspective, when it comes to consent, safeguarding the rights of people, representation, like what's your experience or your observation of the sector in the past years or time?
Thanks, Aurel, for this very big question. First, maybe I want to acknowledge the diversity of our sector. I think, I will speak to it as broadly and widely as I can, but I'm very aware of the different fields of work, the different geographies, the varying complexities that we all navigate in our work and the different environments. But I think we've always held a great importance to informed consent. As you know, it's not a new topic. Safeguarding, there have been principles, approaches. When I first joined the sector almost 20 years ago with the do no harm approach, different standards of accountability to affected populations. I mean, all of these things have always existed over the decades. What I wanted to speak to perhaps is what has evolved, perhaps is a greater reflection, or perhaps a more honest reflection on the nuances. And I think here what I'm speaking to is this greater awareness in our sector on what our role is in shaping more authentic narratives. And, you know, the acknowledgement that we can do better sometimes at putting people in a more central role, giving them the agency they deserve. Assuming sometimes also the bias we have, whether conscious or not, in the way that we produce and sometimes also perpetuate narratives through images or stories that we tell. And I also wanted to note that I feel in an environment at the moment that it's getting increasingly more complex, also in terms of needs. We need to, on the one hand, continue to uphold those ethical norms, respect the dignity of the people we work with and for, but we also need to battle with certain constraints that are getting more complicated, either politically and also financially, it has to be said. And in this context, I think something I wanted to speak to perhaps is also the credibility of our sector. It counts. I think we need to stay accountable not only to the people and communities that are at the center of our work, obviously. It's their right also that we do this. But I think we also need to remain credible to public opinion. And this we can do also better through authentic storytelling. And even more so in a world now where, I don't know, with AI, I think you can generate any story you want really at this point. And a lot of work has gone into the fine-tuning, I guess, of policy, guidelines, data consent, guidelines. Kari just spoke to some really important work that our organization is as well doing. And it's hugely important, I think, and putting them in practice is complex, it's complicated. I think all of the panelists will maybe speak to that later. And I think walking that tightrope isn't always easy. But I think that's no excuse. I think we need to bite the bullet and give it the importance it deserves. So I wanted to speak to that sort of more contextual, perhaps, space that we find ourselves in, authentically telling stories, but also looking out for the credibility of our work.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think it's something that kind of closely relates to a question I wanted to ask you, Kari. Also, especially because you mentioned that you worked on this extensive guideline to kind of ensure this. I think given the increasing complexity or just the complexity that was already existing, how do you ensure that consent is fair, understandable within these complex situations with sometimes limited time, I guess, during content production, but or just these changing circumstances all the time? Kind of like maybe you'd like to kind of illustrate a bit how this process looks like and how maybe even how you balance this ethical and efficiency a challenge or supposed trade-off.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with kind of separating out what you can do pre-trip, you know, before you're visiting the location, and what you can do realistically in the moment, and how you can follow up. So just making sure that you have all those parts of the process thought through. Our guidelines help us to make sure that we're following a path to informed consent. I think there's a lot of things you can do before you actually arrive to do the work. And that leaves a lot of room. I mean, trying to leave as much room as you can in the moment for connection and consent, I think, is crucial. So dealing with as much admin stuff, using tools like the Fairpicture app, some other tools that I've developed I can show you in a minute. But basically balancing the planning and the processing and the connection and the consent. On the planning and processing side, you know, to start the work, I think, of equitable content collection, you have to start with your organization, like very early on, changing expectations, addressing bias that you might not know that you have, like Shazia was mentioning, and having some of those kind of harder conversations as an organization. So we went through a process of that for over a year. And one of the things that I noticed that needed to shift early on was internally thinking about content collection as a process that needed to start with a mind shift. So, you know, sorry, losing my train of thought for a moment here. Basically, like if you switch it from quantity to quality. So instead of saying, okay, I'm going to go out and get like 15 interviews, I'm going to get one really good interview with a woman, a participant that is 100% sure what's happening, 100% on board with telling her story. So it's about shifting that sort of mindset, I think, you know, quality over quantity. So that was something that we needed to do at our organization. And again, timing is super crucial when you're there on location. You don't have a lot of time. So using the tools, one of the tools I developed was a photo example book where we can show those participants how their photo could show up in the world on social media, as a video. And so this is just like a word book that is, you know, waterproof and essentially waterproof. And it, you know, crosses language and cultural considerations so that if I'm working with an interpreter, I can be like, here's this book, please flip through it. So they are very clear on how we might be using their image in the field. So, you know, having the right tools and, you know, working that all out before you get there and making that room for those important connections that you need to make.
Thank you very much. That's super interesting. Maybe, I don't know, there's just a question already in the chat. If you'd be able or like to share this booklet, I don't know if you can or are willing to do this as an example.
Yeah. That's something that we can talk about.
We can also kind of, maybe we can include this in a follow-up email and share with this or something and discuss this. I'm happy to take this up as an idea. Josemarie, you work as a photographer or as a creator who often collects content directly from the people you document or you photograph. How do you ensure that content is obtained? It's kind of truly informed, not just as a formality, especially in this kind of fast-paced or complex, unpredictable environments that you probably work in often.
I think one of the things that I do, and you know, it depends on the context. So if it's maybe going to take pictures at a project that I've gone to maybe before where people know me, it's less of a like an introductory thing, maybe more follow-up. And like, even if I know the people, I'm like, is it okay if I take your picture? And also just kind of reminding them, you know, what the pictures will be used for. And then in cases where it's a new environment and I'm meeting new people, I usually start off without like showing my camera, introducing myself. I think it also depends on if it's an individual or a group of people, and especially when, you know, it's a space where maybe I have to take pictures of a group of people. Like recently I had to, in situations like that, I do like to do like a general sort of consent information sharing and just like talking, and especially if it's a local language, having somebody translate. So that gives it like a sense of like they can understand what somebody is saying. And then I do go to the people individually just to confirm that like they understood it and that if they have any questions. I do like to keep it as friendly as possible. I think especially because, if it's a new environment and maybe they don't know who I am, I do like to introduce myself, just have a few minutes to chat before asking for consent. And then when I do, and especially I think I've noticed the difference of using the Fair Consent app as opposed to going with pieces of paper. I've noticed the difference because it doesn't feel intimidating, especially if you go into a group of people who maybe are not good at reading, writing, signing. The app has really helped because I can, read out the points of how the pictures are going to be used. And then for them to give consent, it's taking a picture with the thumbs up. So that's really good because it removes that sort of tension of I might not understand what the pictures are being used for. And I do like to kind of gauge, even though somebody says yes, do they fully understand why they're saying yes? I've had situations where somebody will say yes because, they seem like they're afraid that if they don't say yes, that maybe they won't get this, maybe something that, they're getting from the project. So I do like to make sure that they understand that it's not just about you saying yes. You don't have to say yes. And if somebody doesn't look too sure, I usually just tell them it's okay, you don't have to. So there is a lot of pressure that comes with not just asking for consent, but making sure that you're not just banking off of somebody saying, yo, it's okay, you can take my picture, but also just leaving room to kind of see if they're 100% comfortable. I do also have situations where I'm not the one who asks for consent. So depending on the client who I'm going with, maybe they already have consent from the participants, which can be nice, but then also I don't know how they've talked about the consent with them. I don't know if they've had a really nice open discussion, or it's more like, oh, there's somebody coming to take pictures. So in cases like that, I do also like to just go back and maybe share in a few words, do you understand why the pictures are being taken, what they're being used for? And I really like this idea for, which Kari mentioned with the tools, just being able to also have visual aids that people can see and understand. Because I have also come across instances where somebody will be like, oh, on a billboard, okay, or oh, my picture's going to be in a newspaper or a magazine or a website, and it's what does that even mean? So it is nice to see that that's something that can work and help, because I do have situations where I'm like, how do I really explain this further than just using words? So I think visual aids are really nice. Yeah.
Thank you. Selva, maybe you can share a couple of the more practical challenges in the field, when collecting consent. I think this would be very interesting, especially when there are maybe clients or commissions from Kari who have very specific requirements. What do you feel are the challenges when working in the field collecting consent as a creator?
Thank you. So I think Kari said that quantity versus quality. So when a client says, file some 40 pictures in a day or 80 pictures in a day, and along with a model release or a consent form, which is kind of challenging. And in such situation, I usually use a assistant. And I think Loganathan, who already worked with me, such project he's also in the talk right now. So I brief him that we are doing a consent form. Could you inform the people and do the consent form first, and then I will do the photography part. And that's one way to work. And another way is if the quantity, less number of images, then the photographer or a visual creator by themselves, they can do the consent form and the photography part. So that's very important when the client commissioning the visual creator, make sure, the creator have enough time to do both, because it's not just, can you sign it here? And even if it is the smallest village in wherever in India or the, Bangalore, nearby Bangalore or anywhere, the moment you say sign a form, they will ask why. So when they ask why, then you have to explain that why we are doing this, and this image is going to be used in these are the specific, scenarios and things like that. So it takes little time also. And the challenge is sometimes some clients ask consent forms, but they don't understand how much time it will take. That's one part. And other part is I don't want to mention the app name, but I used to have another app-based consent form where they will ask email IDs and phone numbers and digital signatures and things like that. But largely these developmental works usually go to the rural part of India, where sometimes people don't know the reading or they can't sign, they might not have an email ID and things like that. So we have to keep those things in our mind. And in such situations, so far, I will ask the partner agencies to, why don't you enter your email ID? Because these are all app-based. So you have to enter those things. Thanks to Fairpicture for the latest app, which is, thumbs up thing, which is they are fine with taking the picture, and which is also very useful. And the other point I just wanted to add is like the app-based consent form is the photos are embedded into the PDF so that it's easy to identify who's signed where. 5 years, 10 years before, usually it is a paper-based one. You just sign it and then you write a big number 1, 2, 3. Then you ask the person to hold the consent form. You take a picture of them with the consent form. Then you send the photos along with your, PDF. So, which is very complicated process. These app-based is very useful these days, and it's even in sometimes tight schedule post shoot when you do a captioning. These consent form helps, who is this and what is their name and where they are from. And some geotagging also helps us precisely what village and things like that. Yeah, of course, the challenges, this other angle is capturing in a candid moment. Because the moment, if you say consent form, you're going to tell them, can I take a photograph of you? Then they become very conscious and largely they stand and give a pose for you sometime. That's a challenging scenario. But sometimes if the space is controlled environment, like a school or a classroom, as Josemarie explained, I inform my partnering agency, would you mind informing the people who are to the community who are going to be come for tomorrow awareness camp or an event? Just inform who are interested in these photography process also, just assemble in a specific space or ask them to wear a specific lanyard, white color or red color, which tells that they are interested or not interested. By doing that, when we are in the space, we know that they are okay with taking a picture, because especially in a scenes like an event or a awareness camp, you can't in between, you can't go and stop them and ask, can I take your pictures and things like that. So these are the challenges, but these are the solution right now. I'm following it. I love to hear others' inputs and learn from them too. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I see we already have a couple of really interesting questions, so I would start picking questions from the audience. Feel free, if you have other questions, to post them to the chat, everyone. And I'd like to start with one that are two questions that are very closely aligned and related to power relations of, say, the organization, the nonprofit, or the people benefiting from this work in the field, and the power relation that comes out of this, that people feel obligated to give consent to images. Kari, from your side, kind of, is this a topic in your guidelines, or how do you work with these power inequalities that are between, say, the organization or the photographer even, and the person giving their consent for a photo.
Yeah, yes, we did consider this quite a bit, because it's very true that, you know, someone would assume that, you know, they would have to take our nutrition supplements in order to participate, which is true, but it doesn't affect their ability to receive those interventions. And so we address that at multiple junctures in order to make sure it's super clear. So before we get there, we have a presentation that we give to the program partner, which is the person that we work through in country. So they're our partner. We work with partnerships throughout the world. So we'll work with another nonprofit that's in the country. And before I arrive, I send them this PowerPoint presentation, or not PowerPoint, but whatever, a presentation that explains our process, the importance of consent, and that our priority is making sure that the participants are comfortable. So we're kind of setting the expectation with the partner on like how we're coming into the situation. And then when we first arrive to the community, we do, as Josemarie was saying, we make sure that we're, you know, explaining very thoroughly who we are, what we do, and why we're there. And in that sort of intro speech, we are sure to include, you do not, you are going to get your medicine, your interventions, no matter how you decide to participate or not, you know, just, so we're you know, it's kind of approaching it from the program partner side so that they have the mindset. And then we're doing the introduction to the participants before we even pull out the camera. So we keep the cameras away until we're, you know, okay, everybody's heard exactly who we are as an organization, as the individuals, and our different roles. And then again, this piece that, you know, you do not need to participate. You can withdraw your participation even halfway through the interview. You can say, I'm not comfortable with this anymore, you know. And this last piece where we hope to level that power dynamic. We even do small things that are seemingly small, but I think make a big difference. Like when I'm interviewing a participant, I sit below her. So she's sitting in a chair and I'll sit like on the ground or something, so that we do like a 3-to-1 rule. So we only have like 3 people present during the interview instead of having like a group of people like staring at, you know, the participant, which definitely makes anyone uncomfortable. It's already uncomfortable. So we consider a lot of these kind of subtle behaviors that we can address that I think level this power dynamic a bit.
Thank you. Josemarie, since you I think mentioned before, kind of including translators within the local language. There's a question of someone asking, well, in rural, very remote, rural areas, do you believe people really understand what it means if their photos are published, kind of in social media, but even in a magazine or on a billboard on a website? Like, what's your experience, or what's your thoughts on that matter, or and what do you do in order to ensure that?
I'll use a recent example. I was in a rural area, not so remote, but you know, rural enough that maybe people don't have billboards like nearby. And I had a translator, and I think what I always like to do, even with the translator, is to be able to make sure that they also understand, because sometimes it'll be somebody who understands, you know, what I've said, just as what I've said, but maybe not like what is, like, why would I have this picture on a billboard, or why would it go on a website? What is a campaign? So I do like to not necessarily like, you know, spend too much time with the translator telling them everything, but just making sure that they get enough so that by the time that they're going to now translate and inform people, they also have like at least enough that they can tell, you know, they can tell people in a way that feels familiar. So I had a case where, even though I know maybe the project won't use the pictures for, you know, certain things, I now focus more on, okay, what is this project likely to, how are they likely to use the pictures? So if I know that they're just going to use them for social media, for if they have a video campaign on their website, then I lean into that, as opposed to like saying, oh, it might be used in this and this and that place, because, you know, it says, or the campaign says how the pictures would be used. So the translator then is able to sort of clarify. And I think in as much as with that specific place, they were quite rural, you'll find a lot of like the younger people have smartphones. There's smartphones that are way cheaper, and they also have access to TikTok, to YouTube. So they're not entirely kind of cut off. So it makes it easier in spaces like that, where if somebody says TikTok, they'll know because their grandchild has a smartphone. So it makes it a bit easier to know that they at least understand, even if they won't understand like the full sense of social media or how it will be used in this platform, they do understand what that means, because they're able to see maybe a video that went viral. Like you'll see all these kids who know all these dances because, you know, they've seen it on YouTube because they have access to it. So it's not completely kind of outside of like something that they'd be able to understand. I haven't been in a case where it's been completely remote, that there's no example that they can understand. So I think in a completely remote cutoff environment, I haven't had that happen. But I do know that in the places that I've gone that are quite remote, and especially the people who I'm interviewing or taking pictures of are much older, they do have a sense of understanding maybe one platform that can kind of like gauge how they'll be like, oh, okay, we'll be seen by people around the world maybe. So especially with the translator, that helps to just be able to know that they will be able to understand something because it's translated for them in a language that they're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Selva, there's a question that might be you might be able to answer. What's your experience kind of in your maybe personal work, but also when you work with commissions in relation to children's consent if the parent is not present? You mentioned before in your answer the school kind of as this typical setting very often. What's generally kind of the requirements when it comes to children and consent in your experience, and how do you work with this? You're muted, sorry.
Yeah, in the specific scenario like a school, and in my experience, usually the school will do all these consent form before the creator goes and shoot, because obviously all the parents are not available to do these things. So as a creator, we trust that the organization or the school informed their parents very clearly what is the usage of these images, where it's going to be used, and things like that. So that's an ideal situation. Sometimes there are cases, you know, you photograph a family, and in that family, probably their relative daughter or a son in the house, and you have the shot, and then you found that it's not their kid or something like that, or the kid is in the frame, then you got to know that it's not their family. And then if you need that image which tells you a story, then you have to go and meet the children's parent and explain that. And if they are comfortable with that, then you take the consent forms. Otherwise, you remove the images, which is don't file those images. And I'm sure, since you are saying commissions, and especially so for the organization I work for, they are very particular about these consent forms, and they ask, you know, double check how many people you photograph. Is that number of consent forms are tally with those number of people and things like that. So as I said, that if you photograph children, if the parents are not available, and find them and get the consent form. Otherwise, don't file the images or you delete the images. That's the best way to do that. Yeah.
Thank you. I think this is a nice transition to a question I had for you, Kari, also in relation to general data handling, or kind of ensuring that you mentioned before that pre-trip in the field, but also post-trip kind of what do you feel, or how do you ensure that afterwards these rights that were given in the consent forms are respected? Can you maybe illustrate quickly how this process works in your internal post-production part? And what I'd be particularly interested would also be, how do you work with consent withdrawal? Like, have you had these cases, and how do you ensure that consent can be withdrawn?
Yeah, we do. We have had situations where women, particularly in the United States, because they see they're in market, so they can see their image in a Walgreens, and so we've had situations where their circumstances may change for good or bad, or they just didn't, in the past. Now that we've tightened it up, I think we're going to see less of that. But we've had a few circumstances where women have asked to withdraw. We have a email address that's dedicated to it. I wish it were a WhatsApp number. We're working on that because I think that's a better tool. It's more accessible. But having like a designated phone number or email address that you hand out when you're there to the participants, and be like, you can withdraw anytime, just contact this number or this email address. And then on our side, we have, a content management system, a DAM, like many nonprofits do, digital asset management system that we use, where we do all our release matching and tagging, so that, and we have a SOP for withdrawal, whether it's from the program partner, the participant. We're able to trace those images in our library and easily access them to restrict them or whatnot. So we do have, an SOP that helps us manage that process. I think it's really helpful.
Thank you. Yes, Shazia, you raised your hand.
Am I allowed to make a quick comment, because this is bringing up so many things for me? I'm so fascinated by also your roles as photographers. I feel like going back to the initial discussion around this power imbalance, and something I think that's super important. I think Kari also mentioned what you can do before the trip, right? The pre-preparation, or Josemarie, in terms of the relationships you're building over time, and creating an environment that basically reduces pressure to consent. And what I mean by that is that I think everyone that we're taking photos of, or the stories we are telling, is part of a system. And I think a good understanding of that system is of huge value. The idea around what happens if I say no, or what do I get if I say yes, and a really informative discussion, as Kari mentioned, is valuable. It takes time and energy sometimes. And I was just curious also, just in your roles as photographers, you do so much more. I mean, you're bridge builders, you're translating to the translator, you're building an empathic, let's say, relationship with the people you were telling the story. I mean, it seems to me quite an important role, quite a frontline role. And I'm curious also to understand whether or not there is that margin of time and space to engage also with a client, to ask for more time, or to ask for a different picture, or to discuss perhaps a different perspective of a story. Sorry, I'm throwing back a question, but I really feel that, in a perfect world, with the perfect system that Kari seems to have also spent a lot of time and investment in creating, it gives a great, sort of a great frame. But outside of that is the imperfect world, where sometimes the reality is, in my experience, of suddenly arriving despite all planning and seeing an entourage of people there, sometimes also local authorities, sometimes also people who have power within the system, that the image is going to be taken. And I think that navigating those spaces is highly challenging. And I think you all have to get the nuance out of that, and to achieve something and keep everybody happy is not an easy role. So I was just speaking to your role also as photographers, and a lot more in this space.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask you a question that kind of relates to this. And that would be, since we also have a lot of communication professionals or people obviously or hopefully invested in the topic of informed consent in this call who work in the organization, like what do you feel is the role of organization in informing kind of this standard, or what Kari before mentioned, kind of transforming the organization itself, having these conversations internally? What do you feel like, what's a path forwards, or how can we kind of induce this change or promote this change within the organizations?
Thanks, Aurel. I'm assuming you want to ask me that question. Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. I would just, something that came back to me just now was what Kari mentioned earlier. I think you said mindset shift, right? And I think ultimately in all the organizations who deal with, I would say, sensitive data in this sense, there is also maybe the need also for somebody, or at least the responsibility to have a sort of a shift in culture. So it's a cultural change where addressing these structural inequalities is part and parcel of just the conversation around how programming happens. Of course, in reality, this has to do not only with the goodwill, but also, I think, the organization's capacity at some level to be able to have those discussions, but also to roll them out, to train people, to make sure that the training is disseminated, and people are also living, let's say, that cultural change and the values and within the policy that they've framed. So I think it starts at the top, I would say, but I do believe, as Kari said, it is a question of also of mind shift change. I was reading a story the other day about an organization, a humanitarian organization, that was going through their photos to look at how many problematic images they had, and came up with 10,000 problematic images. What problematic meant in their particular scenario, I mean, would take some time to explain. I think is irrelevant almost, but already the will to do that and to go through not only your own policy, but also material that you have, and also, more important, to have conversations about it, I think is perhaps the first step.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. I'll just have a look in here. Maybe one for Josemarie. I think this is a nice, it's just a question, or it's an example of a photographer of Rojni Now network who brings a printer with her to kind of show the images. How, like, this is something you've done also, or how do you kind of try to give back or illustrate what they gave their consent for?
Yes, I've had some projects where I've been able to go back, print pictures and take them back. And I've had a few where, because especially, it's a one-off, and it's like you might never go back, just to be able to like get somebody's phone number and send them the pictures, especially right after they've been approved. It's like, okay, I can send you the pictures. There's one of the projects that I did, which was a passion project, where I was able to go back and do like an exhibition in the community. So that was really nice. And I think more than anything, that's like really, it just feels very nice to like go back and, print the pictures and have everyone see how they've been represented. And I think that is really important. A lot of cases also have been with, let's say, young adults or students who have Instagram accounts, or, they just have a phone, so they're able to see their pictures online. So I have had those cases, which is really nice. I do believe that it's important to not just, I think it takes a lot of work as well. And I think that's the important bit, even with the informed consent, like what extra work comes from the clients and the photographers or visual creators. How do we make sure that we're not just like making sure that we've had consent from somebody so we can like go ahead and like, take pictures or do the videos, but also make sure that we're involving them in the process. I think that's something that I'm also trying to navigate. I think sometimes it's easy if I have like a good rapport with the client and it's like, oh, maybe we can do this or share some ideas. But in cases where it's one-off, I think it's important to have like at the beginning of everything, how do we want to make sure that we're not just going to come and take pictures and leave, that we have ways to give people access to what we document from them.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that's unfortunately everything we have time for. I do have a couple of notes before we finish in time, which I'd like to, since you all signed up for an hour panel, another 1.5 hours, maybe we have to rethink this the next time. However, we'll send you an email with some of the comments and notes and resources that were now also mentioned in the discussion. So stay posted with your mailbox in the coming days. Yeah, some have mentioned the Fair Consent app so far. You probably all know about this, or hopefully have a look at it if you're interested. It's available on the Apple App Store and Google Play Store. What's really important, it's the first version. There will be new features coming soon. One was asked just before in the chat, kind of, will there be a visual way of explaining consent? This is planned for the first quarter of 2025. This week, end of this week, there will be a new feature to allow uploading your own consents, which will make the app much more flexible. And then there will be several other kind of new functions coming until the end of the year. If you're interested, please download, test it. It's free for the first 30 days. If you want to have a chat about it or want to use it for your organization, just reach out to us. I'm happy to have a longer conversation, a personal conversation about it. This, there's not the only workshop or FairTalk that we're having. We'll have another FairTalk at the 10th of December on AI images. AI images. Interesting that also someone asked this question just before in the chat. So stay posted for this one. And in between, we have several workshops on different topics like ethical fundraising, stereotypes, depicting poverty, humanitarian visual communication, so on. You'll find all these workshops on our website, fairpicture.org/fairpicture online trainings, or you can just reply to the email that you'll get in the coming days. And last but not least, it's really wonderful to have such an engaged and engaging community in these Fair Talks. I think it's really important that we have a conversation about these topics, that we work on these topics together. It's really wonderful to also welcome so many photographers and videographers here in this call. I think together developing or thinking about this topic, developing tools, developing processes is really important, because then I think we can really have an impact and transform this industry and this. So please join us on LinkedIn, subscribe to the newsletter if you're interested. Send us an email if you want to have a chat with someone from us, if there's a topic that you feel is extremely urgent or is super important to have a look at. Here is also my personal email address if you'd like to reach out. And with this, I would like to thank you all very, very much for participating, especially the 4 panelists, Josemarie, Selva, Shazia, and Kari, for making this conversation so interesting. Thank you very much. I wish you all a nice evening, morning, or afternoon, or good night to the ones in the East. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.